Right, Hannah, who's just finished the video here, I realise this is a little bit backwards. I just want to say, I'm going to preface the whole video with apologies if there's sounds of motorbikes or cars or anything like that. It's very busy on the high street today and I don't know how much I actually ended up just speaking over because I don't tend to notice it until it gets really loud. So apologies for that. Apologies if I also keep scratching my nose. I've got a hair somewhere that is doing my absolute head in. So I don't know how many times I touch my face during this video, but that's what that is. So yes, hope you enjoy the video and I will lead on to that now. Hello everyone. I'm back again. I'm on a bit of a roll with making videos because I don't know, I've just really got into the swing of it now, and the more I'm talking to the camera, the more comfortable I'm feeling. So I thought, let's strike while the iron's hot, and just keep going. So, just before we get started, if you've watched any of my other videos, thanks for coming back. If you're new, my name's Hannah. I am a historian, I work in a museum, and I'm a big lover of books and theatre. And today's video is going to be focusing a little bit on the latter. I've never really done any sort of theatre reviewing or anything, but I do want to talk about a show that I've been to see recently just because I've not seen all that much about it, and I feel like I've actually got something to say. So I just thought it might be nice for me to pop on and talk about my recent trip to see Anne Boleyn the musical at Hever Castle. So this is a new musical, it's not one that's been seen anywhere before, and when I first heard about this I was really excited because obviously I'm a historian and British, as you can tell by the accent, and a musical about Anne Boleyn specifically at Hever Castle, which was her family home, just really intrigued me. New material, there's not much out there about it. There was only, I think, one song released and I didn't listen to it before I went, purely because I wanted to get the whole sort of experience of seeing this show. It was done by a company called Historalia, or Historalia, however you want to say it, but they are known for doing really big, flashy productions at historical sites across Europe, but this was the first one they'd done in the UK. So I was really looking forward to it. I sort of saw about it, I believe, from a What's on Stage article and booked it. Now it is out in Kent, which is a little bit tricky to get to. I went with my parents and we actually ended up renting an Airbnb quite close by, about a half-hour drive away, for 3 days. We had to see it on a Saturday. They only do evening performances, so the performance started at 7:30. On the day that we were there was some sort of drinks reception happening. I don't know whether it was a press night, because I know they'd had sort of an influencer call a couple of days before. So I don't know if this was press or whether it was family members or producers or something like that, but it did mean that the show ended up going up a little bit late, because they were being the VIPs were being sort of transported to and from their little area. The nice thing about having a show in a place like this is my family and I did spend the day at Hever Castle. And before I get into the actual show, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the setup of it, because it was a little bit strange, and there were certain parts of it that I didn't think worked particularly well. So we'd gone in the day to the castle and they have two car parks. They have a car park at the top opposite the entrance, and they have what is called the Lakeview car park, I believe, which is where they wanted people to park for the musical. Now we got there for opening in the morning because we had tickets to look around the grounds and look around the castle, and we asked the parking attendant if we could sort of park straight in that Lakeview car park because we would obviously be there all day, and we were told no, you've got to park in the car park opposite because we wait for this car park to fill up and then open the other one, which is completely fair enough. I completely understand that. But it did mean that at 6 o'clock, when the grounds closed to the day visitors, and just before the doors opened at 6:30 for the people going to see the show sort of could enter, there was a really tricky bit of manoeuvring that had to happen across the road. So there's like a main road, Hever Castle's on the one side with the car park that we needed to be in next to it, and we were opposite. So we had to sort of cross this main road while all the people that weren't staying for the show were trying to get out of that other car park, which was a single track lane. So logistically, it wasn't super easy, but obviously if you're not driving, that's not an issue. And if you are driving and you're going for the day, it might be easier to wait a little bit later just to get there, so that top car park fills up, because that car park is really small, that first one that we were sent into. And it must have filled up within about an hour of being open, because it looked more like an overflow car park. Which is obviously nothing to do with the show, that's more just to do with the setup, but it is a bit awkward, and you've got that sort of hour to get out of the grounds, get in the car, park again on the other side, join the queue, get back into the grounds. So there was just a lot of logistical things. And my dad has recently broken his foot, so it wasn't ideal for him to have to do a lot of walking in and out. I'm sure had we said something, they would have been able to do something, but it just all seemed a little bit hectic anyway, so we just thought we'll just stick with it. It's not really an issue, but logistically it just was a little bit strange. This was then compounded by the fact, and I am going completely off piste here for the show, that when we did get into the car park, the right car park, there was a lot of cars turning up, and there was only one person directing traffic, and they were parking people a little bit strangely. I'll see if I can insert some sort of graphic, but if I can't, I'll see if I can explain what the situation ended up being. Now, if you're from the UK and you've been into a car park at one of these places, like a historical castle, you probably know that you've got like the hard bits to park on, and then there's like grass verges, and usually you'll park sort of next to each other going up. So you'll have like a row of cars on one side, a row of cars on the other side, and then that bit in the middle just free. This is not how they were parking people. They were parking people sort of straight on. So you were driving into the car park and not going up to the side. You were sort of parking right next to each other, which is fine because obviously we were already there. We were sort of the second row back, so you were fine. We could get in and out. That would have been okay. But as it got busier and there was just this one person directing traffic, there were people parking sort of 3 cars deep. There were cars completely blocked in. It was just a little bit, it felt a little bit unorganised, which isn't really the best impression before you're going into somewhere that you've paid quite a bit of money to sort of go to a show. And I sort of dread to think what would have happened if there was someone in the middle of that car parking space that needed to, for some reason, get their car out, go and do something, emergency pops up, you just want to get out. They wouldn't have been able to without moving every single other car. It was just a little bit unorganised and strange, to the point where we actually had a picnic out in the car park because you couldn't take food or drink in with you. Well, it said in the email you couldn't, but there was no one really bag checking, but they said you couldn't, so we didn't. And we sort of just sat on these grass verges eating a picnic and just watching as people were getting more and more confused, because I think the further back in the car park they got, they realised there was no way they were getting out of this before the people in front of them, which, like I said, for us was fine because we were right at the front, so we could just get in the car and go. But I think if you were in a rush to get back, you'd have really struggled. But that's sort of by the by, and I mean, if you're coming by train or you're local, that doesn't really matter. And if you're like us and you're staying locally, it doesn't matter either. But I think if you had a particularly long journey afterwards, that's not really what you wanted to go into or come out of again. So when we got inside, the checking in process was super easy. We just had the barcodes on our phone, on my phone. I scanned it at the gates and went straight in. We'd obviously been there during the day, so we knew where the tent was, the sort of stage area was. and again, I'll try and insert some photos if I can. But if not, check out my Instagram. I'll leave my handle in the description and you can go and check out there because I've uploaded some pictures already. It was a really, really long walk, and it was a really quite steep walk as well. It was a hot day, so I was wearing sort of ballet flats, and there was one point where I did think I'm going to go flying down this hill. Wasn't a super easy walk, and like I've said, Dad's recovering from a broken ankle, so it wasn't super easy on his foot either, and there was quite a lot of older people that were struggling a little bit on the way down. I'm not sure if there was an accessible route. I'm sure if you'd asked, and I mean, from where we were earlier in the day, we could see there were easier ways to get to this, but they obviously didn't have the whole site open for just the evening. They wanted to try and keep people in the same area. But it is worth thinking about if you're going and you've got accessibility needs, or if you're in a wheelchair or anything like that. I don't think you would have got a wheelchair down there safely. But then again, I might be talking out of turn, and they might have had contingencies for this. I'm sure if they saw you in a wheelchair, they might have sent you another way. Obviously that wasn't a thing for us, but it is something to keep in mind. It is just a little bit tricky to get to. But once you're sort of down in that area, the gates opened an hour before the show started, so we went straight in, went down. There is a bar there. Not all that much seating. There was a lot of people just sort of stood around. And not that many tables in that area, so that is worth keeping in mind as well. If you're like me and you're interested in this type of thing, there was a little merch stand in there. I do like a show that has its own merch. I like a little souvenir. They had your basics, your t-shirts, jumpers, bookmarks, and they had programmes as well. I've got mine here, just in case I need to refer to it at any point, but this is the artwork for the show, and it is very, very pretty. So yeah, picked up a programme. Can't remember how much it was off the top of my head, but I remember it being sort of comparable with West End prices. It wasn't that bad. So yeah, once we'd been in that sort of little entrance area where the bars were, there was also food as well, and picked up a programme. They opened the doors. It's a sort of temporary structure. It's almost like arena seating, looking at the stage, and there's a big open back on it, and through the back of that you can see the grounds and Hever Castle just behind it. As we were going in, we were handed a set of headphones each. I don't know if anyone's been to a silent disco, but they were the Silent Disco Company headphones. Sent me straight back to Freshers Week at university, but yes, they sort of gave you the headphones, said make sure you're on the blue channel, I believe it was, and we went and sat down. The seats weren't hugely comfortable, as they can't be expected to be. They were outside, so they were just sort of plastic, almost like leisure centre seats, if like the folding down plastic seats, but they were fine. I think wherever you were sat, you would have probably got a good view. We were in the centre block. I believe we were the silver section of tickets, so it was sort of the third band down from the most expensive. There was like platinum, gold, silver. We were silver, sort of central. It was a really good rake on the seats, so there was no chance of the people in front blocking your view. I think if you had a really, really tall person in front of you, there might have been an issue. But it doesn't usually affect me. I'm quite tall. I'm sort of 5'7", and I could see everything fine. So yeah, we've all sat down, all put our headphones on. They did an announcement saying, can you put your headphones on? Make sure you're on the blue channel. Can you hear everything? If you can't hear anything, put your hand up. And then they didn't play anything. And then the show started, and then a load of hands went up because people realised that their headphones weren't working. Luckily mine were. There weren't too many people. I think a couple of people had the headphones on the wrong setting as well, so I think there was a little bit of confusion there. And it is a very strange way to listen to theatre. All the actors were singing live, all the words were being delivered live, but you were listening to it through headphones, which did get quite uncomfortable. I took my earrings out at one point because they were just sort of pressing into my brain, but that's completely by the by. That's just a personal preference thing. Overall, they worked really well. I will say in Act 2 they got a bit distracting because it got dark and the audience is full of people wearing blue glowing headphones. It was a little bit strange. And yeah, that did get distracting, but overall I thought it worked really well. There was no problems with hearing. At one point someone's mic was giving some weird feedback. I'm assuming it's because of the loop they were using, but that sort of sorted itself out quite quickly. And I mean, it's outdoor theatre, I think there's only so much you can do, but overall it worked really, really, really well. Hannah, who's already finished the video, just jumping back in here again. While I'm talking about organisation, I meant to say this at the time, but this became a very rambly video and I just ended up missing it out. We didn't have any problems with finding seats getting into the auditorium at all the first time, and we sort of stayed in there all the way through, so this is just purely observation that I'm talking now. When we got to the interval, me and my parents stayed sat where we were because we didn't need anything, so we didn't go out. A lot of the people around us did, and our row was completely full. And about halfway through the interval, a very well-dressed lady came and sort of sat in the row with us, who definitely hadn't been there before. And she was with an usher, one of the people who was sort of seating people, and he was like, "Yep, you sat here," and walked off. And we all sort of looked side to side and thought, that's a bit strange, she definitely wasn't there before. And her partner came over and sat with her, and then we were getting towards opening of Act 2 and the people who were sat there came back and said, "You sat in our seats." And she was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, we were just told to come and sit here by one of the ushers. We'd had a problem with our seats and asked if there was anywhere we could move to, and he said here." And this woman said, "Well, sorry, but these are the seats that we booked. We've been sat here in Act 1. And she actually turned to the people in the row behind and was like, "I am in the right row, aren't I? I was definitely sat here." And we were all sort of going, "Yeah, you're definitely there." So this lady and her partner got up, went to find someone else to ask. And it was all just a little bit strange. So it was just another one of those little bits of organisation that just wasn't quite there. And I understand that we went to it quite early in the run. I will have to double check the dates of this show. But it's just the type of thing that you don't really want happening, because the people who moved, the people who had to move, obviously had an issue in Act 1 with their seats, had then been told this other thing, then got told they couldn't sit there, so had to go and find someone again. It's just not what you really expect when you go to the theatre. And obviously it was a bit of a shock for the people who'd gone out as well. And then people started to come back in, more people started to come back in, we were sort of heading towards Act 2. And they closed half of the doors into the auditorium, so it was a really, really long run of seats, and they had a door our end and a door the other end, but they shut the door the other end, so everyone going down all of the rows of seats had to go past everyone who was already in there. And yeah, it was just very, very odd. I don't know whether there was an issue with something with the other doors, but it did mean that it was really quite awkward to get people back into their seats again, and it meant that Act 2 went up late as well. Now, after Act 1 had already gone up late, it did mean that the show finished much later than it was supposed to, so anyone who was trying to get the train back to London, I'm not sure that you would have actually made it, because they were sort of advertising that this is a show that you can do from central London. There's a couple of train stations quite close by. I think it would personally be a bit of a push. But yeah, I think it would have just added a little bit more stress onto the evening. So there was just a couple of little things like that were going on that did make me sort of stop and think maybe there's some organisational stuff that needs to happen here. Thinking about the show, like I said earlier, I'm not a theatre critic. I go to a lot of shows and I do tend to have opinions on a lot of shows, but I'm not sort of an official critic. And this was a really strange one to watch because it was a new show. I'm not sure where it, or how or if it had been workshopped at all. The songs were some of the songs were really good, some of them were quite catchy, and I can see them going on to being quite sort of fun cult theatre songs. There were a couple of songs in this show that I genuinely was waiting for them to finish. And I don't like ever feeling like that in a show. There were a couple that were just not my favourite, and I spoke to my mum and dad in the interval, and there was a song in Act 1 that we all sort of went, that didn't need to be there, it could have gone. I'm just going to have to open the programme. Sorry, there might be a weird jump there because I was trying to find the running order in the programme, and I found it now, so I will be looking down a little bit, but that is just because I'm double checking. Yes, the song in Act 1 that I hated, and I know I said in my theatre tag that I don't like using the word hated, but it's annoying that this is the only song that I really remember, because I remember how much I didn't like it. Because it was called The King Is Coming, and it just felt like it could have just not been there. It could have just been a scene. Just before I go on and talk any further about the songs, there's something really important that I didn't bring up earlier that I feel like I should have, and that is that yes, this is a professional show and it has professional actors and actresses in it, but a big part of the way that Historalia work is they use local talent, so they've got a sort of community aspect to it. As someone who works in a museum, I love that. I love getting people involved. I love sort of giving people the opportunity to be involved in something like this, because at the end of the day, it is for the most part, educational show, and it is providing opportunities in arts and almost heritage, I suppose, to local people. But it did mean that there were certain numbers and scenes where that contrast was really quite obvious between who was part of the community cast and who was a main sort of professional cast member. And there were certain moments where that was much more visible than others, like the big crowd scenes where they were all supposed to be dancing together. You could tell who was from what sort of group. But I mean, as far as criticisms go, I think a couple of dodgy songs and some not hugely inspiring choreography is not the worst. Another problem that I had with this show, and I promise there are good things coming, but when you go and see something, I always find the negatives are what stick with you most. So I'm going to get them out the way first, and then finish sort of on a high, because overall I did enjoy the show and I'm really glad I went to see it. But there's a couple of scenes that have, oh gosh, what's her name? Catherine of Aragon. You would think that as someone who's a fan of Six and history in general, I would have the Queens on lockdown, but I just don't. So Catherine of Aragon is obviously in this show, and I did find her to be quite villainised. A lot of her scenes, she wasn't really particularly endearing, and I understand that she probably wasn't nice to Anne, but also she was being passed over by her husband. He was trying to divorce her because of problems with fertility, and she was a very I don't know, she wasn't very respected, and I just think turning her into a villain in all of this was probably not the way to go. And she did have one of the weaker songs as well, called We Are Queens, which I think in a sort of post-Six world just felt a little bit twee. And they had, with that song, probably one of the most sort of, don't want to say heinous, but it really was. This is the one thing that straight away I was like, this is not good. All the costumes were fantastic. Everyone had very sort of period appropriate costumes, and from where I was sat, they all looked incredibly well made. This song, everyone that was in it had a fan, which would have been used at Tudor Court, but this fan looked like it was made of gold glittery craft paper, and they just looked beyond cheap. I'm gonna just be blunt with it, because it did look really, really cheap. And they were sort of oversized as well, and I was like, I don't know what we're going for here. Are we going for a sort of Six-esque, slightly heightened version of Tudor history, or are we trying to keep it in line with the rest of the costumes and the rest of the show? Because if that's the case, then this has just really taken me out of it. And it was just, it was the only bit of costume that was like that as well. So on top of already a not particularly sympathetic view of Catherine, you've also given her one of the weirdest props in the whole show. And it just didn't really work for me. I wasn't a huge fan. That's the second time in sort of 3 videos that I've made that slip of the tongue. I didn't mean it like that, but you know, it just didn't look right. And I think when you've got a show, I mean, tickets weren't cheap for this. I think ours were sort of £70-ish each. And like I said, that was the third band down, so they did get slightly cheaper, but none of them were what I would call cheap tickets. I think when you're paying that much for a show, you do expect a really well put together show, which I'm not convinced this was overall. I think there were really, really strong elements, and like I said, glad I went to see it, but I did have a little bit of a critique of that, and it did sort of ruffle me up the wrong way a little bit. While I'm being negative, not that I want to be negative, but while I'm being negative, I will say the opening song of Act 2 was, I thought we'd hit the bottom with The King Is Coming. We then had what is in the programme as Ha Ha Ha, which was actually H and A, which was Henry and Anne, which was not a good song. It was probably the worst opening of an act I've seen. It genuinely did not excite me for Act 2. It just wasn't fantastic. It did lead into what I would say is the strongest song in the show though, so I'm not sure how I can judge this section, because the song after this, a song called You, which Anne sings to Elizabeth, her daughter. Again, like I said, I don't have names on lockdown, but she sings it to Elizabeth after she's been born, because she was supposed to be a boy. Well, she wanted her to be a boy to sort of secure the line of succession. Obviously wasn't. It's a really emotional moment. It's a really beautiful song. And like I said, the main cast were phenomenal. They had really, really, really good voices, and I sort of believed everything. I really believed, just checking her name. Yeah, so it was Emily Lane playing Anne Boleyn, who has recently been in Frozen the musical, I believe, is Anna, and you could sort of tell she had a very Disney voice. It was a really, really lovely voice, and I really did believe her as Anne, and she made her very human and sort of highlighted just how clever she was to get to where she managed to get to, and you did really feel for her at the end. She had a really good relationship with Joshua Oakes Rogers, who was playing George, her brother, and the two of them were sort of really carrying the show for me. Their relationship with each other, and then obviously how the story ends is not particularly happy for either of them. Sorry, I know now that you can hear the sound of the high street. Yeah, they sort of really, really sold it. They were the highlight of the show for me, and which is good because the show sort of revolves around the Boleyn family, so having 2 really good actors in those lead roles really, really helped that show. Now that I've spoken about that, I want to sort of talk a little bit more about the staging of the show. It was a really interesting stage design. So the stage was a reasonably big stage. You could fit all of the cast on it, and that's just rude. Yeah, so it was a reasonably big stage. They boasted all the way through, all the marketing sort of was like, there's a 70 strong cast and you could get all 70 people onto that stage. So just to give you a bit of an idea of the scale of this thing. And they did utilise the space behind it as well. There was a bit of a sort of castle green behind it, which is actually part of the landscaping, which they did utilise a couple of times. And obviously the backdrop of the castle was brilliant. A couple of other little nerdy set bits that I picked up on because we'd done the tour of the castle during the day. The colours of the drapes on the set were the colours of the drapes in the Boleyn's living room, actually in the castle. So there was a lot of nice little nods to the actual architecture and the sort of environment that Anne would have known and been brought up in. So that was really, really nice. I think the sort of background area was slightly underused. They used it for, there's like a May Day scene where they had a load of kids out there with a maypole dancing and singing and with a maypole. And that was really nice. And it was used a couple of other times as well, but it wasn't really it wouldn't be necessary. It felt like it could be ported straight onto a West End stage, and as long as you had a picture of Hever Castle in the background, you wouldn't really be losing that much. Right, this is Editing Hannah coming at you significantly later in the year. It is now late October, and it's taken me a while to film or to edit this video. What I was coming in to say is, this point in the video I'm about to talk about past productions that Historalia have done. I was going to go back and look at the trailers that I'd seen before booking these tickets, and I actually can't find them anywhere anymore. They're no longer on their YouTube channel. They used to have sort of teasers and trailers and roundups and all sorts on their YouTube channel, but they don't anymore. So I was going to put some screenshots in, but I can't. So you'll have to just take my word for what I'm about to say. Not that it matters, because again, this is a show that opened and closed in August of this year. But yeah, I was going to put images in, but best laid plans and all that. Another gripe that I had with the staging is, if you look at other Historalia productions and other sort of trailers for their stuff, you'll notice that there's a lot of pyrotechnics going on, massive sets, jousting, all sorts. And a couple of weeks before the show happened, I had an email saying, we're building the set, the horses are in training, this, that and the other. And I thought, God, this is going to be massive. They've got horses in training 3 weeks out. And there were 2 horses in this show. One, oh sorry, a bird just flew into my window. One that trotted across that back field with Henry VIII on, and one that trotted down that back field with Elizabeth on at the very, very end of the show, while Elizabeth is queen. So she's looking back on her mother's life and they have a lovely scene together. And compared to their other productions, I just don't think it measured up. They sort of advertise it as this sort of historical extravaganza, which it kind of wasn't. It was a show outside. And I do also take issue with the fact that in a couple of reviews I've seen it be called an immersive show. It's not. Just by using the stairs through the audience to bring people onto stage doesn't make it an immersive show. I don't know where that word's been sort of brought into it, but it was a show in a setting, like a contemporary setting, that sort of utilised to an extent the environment, but it wasn't an immersive show. So just in case anyone is thinking of going based on any of those bits of marketing they've seen or any of those reviews they've seen, that is just something to bear in mind. You might leave a little bit disappointed. Even though it is a good show, it's not quite what you expect looking at their other stuff. Now I am going to go on to the good stuff, the stuff that I enjoyed about this, because I feel like I've been negative for long enough. As of right now, I've been filming for 29 minutes. I don't know if the video up to this point is going to be 29 minutes. I hope it's not. I hope I can cut out quite a lot of my ums and ahs and cars going up and down the high street, but it should be a decently long video up to this point, so that's a lot of complaining. So let's get some good stuff out. Most of the songs were really, really good. Most of them were really, really strong. I think if you took out the 2 that I didn't like, you wouldn't actually miss them, and you would leave people with a much better sort of impression of the score. The score sounds amazing as well. There's no band on site, which is always a little bit sad. I do love a musical that's got a big band. If you saw my theatre tag video, you'll know that an overture or a score really gets me. I didn't have that sort of emotional reaction to this one because it is all pre-recorded by, I believe, the City of Prague Philharmonic Orchestra. So it sounds amazing, and it's coming through your headphones, but they're not actually there. But also I understand that it is sort of a residential area. There's houses really, really close. So as a way of getting around that, that is brilliant, because it means you do get that big orchestra sound without annoying the neighbours, basically. Yeah, I did really enjoy the music. A lot of it was really, really good. The songs do all do what I like a musical sort of song to do, which is actually move the plot along. They're all there for a reason, with the exception of the 2 that I mentioned. But they're all really, really strong. And the people in these roles, the cast, could they all had really good voices. They had really good voices on them. And I would be interested to see what other things they go on to do next, because I would like to think that a big project like this would, especially for the ones that haven't done loads of work, would sort of push them into much bigger roles, because they were just great. I really enjoyed listening to them. I think the most important thing is with this show, because it's about a historical figure and it's being staged in the home of this historical figure, there is quite a strong expectation for it to be 100% factually correct. Now, I don't know enough about Tudor history. I'm not a Tudor historian. I don't know enough about it to say whether it is completely accurate or not. It hits all the beats of everything that I know. Like, all the characters are right, they're played right, to my knowledge. With the exception of my sort of little gripe with Catherine of Aragon. I think she was a little bit maligned. I do think it's important to say here as well, I did take a little bit of issue with the very, very end. And that is because, as we know, there's a plot by Thomas Cromwell to get rid of Anne, even though he was the one who tried to put her into the role of queen, to further his politics. She then starts sort of pulling away from him, and he sets up Jane Seymour as the next Queen of England. And he's the one who sort of pushes this agenda that she's almost heretical. She's sort of got the ear of the king. She's this awful woman they need to get rid of. She's been having affairs. She had an affair with her brother, none of which is true. And the way that it's staged sort of absolves Henry of any wrongdoing in signing her death warrant, which is quite an impressive feat of writing, because at the end of the day he was her husband. And I mean, one of the real strengths of this is it really shows how much he did love her to begin with, and their relationship I very much believed all the way through. And then you get to the end, and if you didn't know the story, if you didn't know the history, you would think that he basically had nothing to do with it and had no power in the situation. He did have power in the situation. He was the one who wrote that he wanted his wife to get her head chopped off. And it does sort of make you, there is a way you could come out of this and go, oh, well, he had no choice really, so it's all Cromwell's fault. And I just don't think that's right. That doesn't sit right with me. This is a woman, this is a young woman who was forced into this position. She had a young child at the time. You can't really say that the man who signed her death warrant was in any way innocent in the situation. It was a little bit strange, especially sort of given the fact that all the way through they'd been celebrating her as this fantastic, smart, educated woman, which she was. Yeah, it was just a little bit odd. But like I said, all the way through you do get this glimpse of her that you don't see in any other adaptations. I think, and I keep mentioning Six because there's obvious parallels between that show about the wives of Henry VIII and this show about a wife of Henry VIII, or three as the case becomes. And I don't think that Six is the perfect adaptation or visualisation of these women, but it's not supposed to be. That's supposed to be a very sort of specific viewpoint. And this does humanise Anne a lot more and make her someone that you almost do want to get to know, and you do want to hear more about. So yeah, overall, this show is a little bit all over the place. I didn't realise just how mixed my views were on it until I sat down to make this video. Now, I don't want people to, if you've got tickets to this show, you're gonna have a fab time because the atmosphere is amazing and most of the songs are good and they're all sung incredibly well, and you'll really, really enjoy it. If you're a sort of purist historian, you might not necessarily. I didn't take any issue with the history. Usually with a historical musical, I'm the person that will point out any wrongdoing. I didn't notice anything like that. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I'm glad I went. And I would go and see one of their productions again. If they do another production in the UK, I would be interested to see what location they could get, who they were going to base it on, and I would go and see it. I just think that the work wasn't ready almost. It almost needed a couple more workshops, a couple more rewrites, and there is a really, really, really tight show in there somewhere. Like I said, there was bits I loved. I loved the community involvement. I loved the sort of making history super accessible to people. That is something that I really love as someone who works in exhibitions and museums specifically. I like it when you sort of say to people, history is for everyone, come on in, it doesn't matter what you do, what you don't know, just come on in, have fun. And yeah, I think unfortunately a lot of my negative views of this came from the sort of organisational side, because if you've had a sort of stressful situation getting into somewhere, that does tend to be your overarching memory of it, which is definitely what happened here. So overall, bit of a mixed bag. Like I said, I'm not a reviewer. I can't comment closely on a lot of things. There are other people who've probably put their thoughts together much better than I have. But yeah, I just wanted to upload something about this show because I had thoughts on it and I thought these might be quite helpful thoughts for other people. If you're thinking about going, if you've been, if you had similar thoughts, if you had a different experience, I think it's just interesting to have this up here. So thank you for watching. I don't know what my next video is going to be. I don't know when this one's going to go up. I've got a couple in the pipeline at the moment. I've either just uploaded or I am about to upload a video from a trip to Alton Towers, which is completely different to theatre and books. I am going to try and get a book related video up soon as well, because I keep talking about how much I love reading and I realise that everything's been very theatre focused so far. But yeah, in the meantime, please do subscribe if you want to see more of my videos. If you agreed with me, if you didn't agree with me, leave a comment down below and I would love to hear what you thought as well. And I will see you next time. Bye.